A crisis is an opportunity. Seize it. Seize it. You don't get many of those. Seize it, solve it, and then move to the next level. You don't get that many open doors. And so
Got it.
suddenly before me was an open door, and I recognized it, thankfully, that this was a chance to kind of put my business on the next level.
Phillip, you're wearing some swag this morning.
Oh, you noticed, yeah. Got my Logic Force. That ultimately was the name of my business. That wasn't the name of the business day one. I started out with the really creative name of Hampton Technologies.
You had a big search for ad firm get together and
That's
spent
right.
millions of dollars to get Hampton
Yes.
Technologies.
Hampton Technologies. And it was just, I had to do a bill and I had to put a name at the top. And I'm like, what can I call this? My last name. And what do I do? Technology. There you go.
There we
So
go.
um, I did that for several years. And then the business began to pick up and I began to get
Okay.
referrals and begin to build the business. So, though probably I would say the first inflection point, Kent,
Mhm.
in the business where I kind of got over that hump, and we talked about earlier about the percentage of businesses that don't make it past year one, past year five. And so
Right.
I was right at that point when I faced my first crisis, if you will. And it
Okay.
wasn't a crisis of my making or an internal crisis, but it was an external crisis. And as it turned out, just gonna be honest with you, it was a hoax.
Oh, really?
Do you remember Y2K?
How's
Do
Yes, yeah.
were
But
you alive during
someone
Y2K?
I
No,
was I
so
was a babe, a
no,
baby. Yeah.
some of our young viewers probably will have no reference to what is Y2K. In 1999, there was a movement on in business and culture and everywhere saying the millennium, the year 2000, catastrophic things are going to happen. Number one, all of our computer technology is not equipped to handle the year 2000. Was that true? That was, in some respects, it was true. There were some computer programs, for instance, and I actually worked on some that had only allocated 2 digits for the year, thinking, "Oh, we'll always be in the 1900s."
Sure.
And those programs absolutely would have done unpredictable things once the clock rolled over. But in general, traffic lights were still going to work, computers were still going to boot up, but there was a notion in pop culture in 99 that we're headed for the apocalypse if we don't get the newest and the greatest before Y2K.
Right.
So I took advantage of that
Okay.
because, as you know, I was a tech consultant for law firms working with small to medium sized law firms that did not have an in house IT department. I was their outsourced IT department, one man show. Back then, at least in Nashville, Tennessee, law firms were very averse to change, particularly technological change. And
Okay.
even if the business community at large was slow to adopt to new technology, the legal community was even behind them, very averse to change. And so you would have them operating on really ancient IT infrastructure in the late 90s from 95
Okay.
to 2000. But suddenly, people begin to wake up and like, oh my word, my computer's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to edit documents and all this sort of thing, Y2K. And so law firms begin to call me saying, hey, we're worried about Y2K. I think we need to upgrade. And I'm like, you know what? Not a bad idea. And it wasn't a bad idea. Would their computers
Sure.
still work after Y2K? Maybe, probably, but not because of Y2K, because they were ancient and they might fail anyway. And
Right.
so I took advantage of that perceived crisis to grow my business. And I picked up a ton of clients in 1999.
Wonderful.
And so what happened is I really I really maximized the amount of time that I was working. I still had my programming gigs that I was doing on the side to kind of pay the bills, but now the consulting business of working with these law firms was taking off, and I was spending a lot more time upgrading entire networks, setting up new computers, new servers, new environments all over the place. I was working nonstop. Was that a challenge? Absolutely, it was a challenge. Was it exhilarating? Absolutely, it was exhilarating because I now knew that I had a business that was meeting a particular need and it was growing.
Right.
And so
Okay.
that was when I made the decision to hire the first full-time employee, FTE, we call it, FTE, first FTE. I learned that
Okay.
little lingo later on. I didn't know what an FTE
Right,
was,
right,
and I heard some business
right,
people talking. How many FTEs you got? I'm like, is that a disease? What is that?
right,
Full
right,
time
right.
employee. That I didn't
Oh,
know all
okay.
of the business speak.
Yeah.
So I hired my first FTE, and so we began because I couldn't get to all the clients, all the needs out there. So what did
Right.
that mean for me? That meant really a demand on my time and more sacrifice. Okay, so more balancing of business life, church life, and personal life.
Okay.
And there's give and take. There's give and take. And so
Right.
my business was taking up a lot more of my time. Now, did I drop personal relationships? Did I drop church attendance? No. Did Was there some trade-offs? Yeah, I'm sure there was. Absolutely, there was. But I felt like it was time to accelerate the business, and this was an opportunity. Instead of looking at this as a crisis, I looked at it as a huge opportunity. And one thing is common in my experience in business is that when there is a big opportunity, whether it comes through crisis, which many times it does, you have to seize that opportunity and run with it and run hard because
Okay.
you don't get that many open doors. And so
Got it.
suddenly before me was an open door, and I recognized it, thankfully, that this was a chance to kind of put my business on the next level. Hence, I came up with a new name for the business. We were no longer Hampton Technology because why? Because I was not sending out somebody to work on a network whose last name was Hampton. And I didn't want it to be identified with me. Why is that? This is one thing that I had foresight about that I didn't even realize it.
Okay.
But I was thinking long range. Let's say this business grows really big, okay? And let's say somebody at some point in time wants to buy the business. I didn't know how all that worked, but I was thinking if it's called Hampton Technologies, then they're going to think it's all me. And if I'm not in the business, it'll fall apart. I want
Ah,
something that will stand independent of my name.
sure.
And
Okay. That
so
makes sense.
I wanted to find another name for the business other than Hampton Technologies.
See.
Do you want to know how I found the name Logic Force?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it
I can tell
works.
you're on the edge of your seat.
I, well, I was like, yeah, because Logic Force works. Wait, was it Logic Force Technologies or was it Logic Force?
Logic Force
Just
Consulting, LLC.
consulting.
So
Yeah,
I
I like
did
it, but yeah, it's not. Those aren't logical words to be put
no, no,
together. So
no.
tell me about it.
Um, First of all, I met with an accounting professional to say, look, my business is growing. I'm going to be hiring a person. I'm making more money. I want to do this the right way. Oh, what is the recommendation? And the recommendation was to form a limited liability company. And not everybody does
Okay.
that. Some people do other organizational structures, so that's fine. But that worked for me. And so that's when I needed to come up with the name because you have to file the papers with the
Sure.
state and all that sort of thing. And we were sitting around. It was at my house. My brother had graduated from college and had moved to Nashville and was living with me while he was
Hmm.
looking for work and found a job. And so he and a couple of other friends of mine, we were sitting around. I said, "Hey, and I'm filling out some paperwork. I'm saying, "Hey guys, I need a name for my business." And they started throwing out stuff. It was crazy. And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." I said, "I want it to be," and this is the part that I insisted on. I wanted something that is logical because I am a very logical thinker. I'm a programmer, I'm a software
Yes.
engineer. So the whole foundation of software design is logic. Everything is logic. Everything
Yes.
makes sense if you think of it logically. And I said, I've it's got to have logic in it. And so we started saying logic technologies, logic, and somebody goes, logic force. I go, whoa, that just hit me. I love it. We're
Right.
a
Yeah.
force, we're a force for logic. And so we looked it up. I think there's a website you can go on the Tennessee Secretary of State to check a name to see if it's already been taken. It was not taken, and
Okay.
I think maybe there's a website you can see if a name's been copyrighted or whatever. And
Right.
nobody had that name, and so that's it. That's perfect. We're is like Geek Force would come much later. I think they copied my
Sure.
name. They wanted Logic,
Of
but I'd already
course.
taken it, so they used Greek for it. Yeah, Geek
Yeah.
Force. But
G-force. Yeah.
we're like a task force coming in to fix your tech problems, and we only deal with logic. And
Yeah.
and I also felt like that would appeal to attorneys because what do
Oh,
attorneys do? It's logical. You make a
right.
logical argument in the courtroom. So that
Right.
was the birth of Logic Force. And so during that time, we created a logo, we created a website, all that sort of fun stuff. But it
Yes.
it took time, it took additional resources that we had to invest back into the business, and we were now growing the business. And I now was cognizant of the fact that I am building a consulting business that I am going to now try to scale. Now, I don't know if I'd thought about it in those discrete terms back then, but
Yeah.
subconsciously I realized, okay, I'm on a train here and now we're going somewhere. Now I still had these little side gigs over here that I'm doing to make money, the programming, and I quickly had to make a decision because that consumed a lot of time, but that paid a lot of bills too.
And had paid bills for roughly 3 to
5
5
years.
years.
Yes,
Yeah.
had paid bills. Very safe, dependable. The work was always there and I could
Mhm.
depend on it. But that was not what my new business was doing. My new business was not so much programming, it was doing consulting, setting up networks, training, help desk, consulting with law firms on their technology and so forth. Now I'm being pulled in multiple directions, trying to grow that, trying to keep up with my programming, trying to do the admin stuff, creating website and logos and swag and all that sort of stuff, trying to source employees, trying to screen and hire employees, then bringing them on, trying to come up with standards. What are the standards for working for Logic Force? I had no standards. I had to
Right.
create that. Here's what we do. You fill out timesheets, create all of these policies and procedures. I'm doing all that while at the same time, I am the number one revenue generator for the business. So if I let up off on that end, I don't have the money to pay the bills. See the challenge? That's the
Right.
challenge of growing a
Yes.
small business. Huge challenge.
Right.
Did it impact my personal life, my spiritual life, all of the above? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got to
You
maintain
had
balance. You've got balance is so important in life in general and certainly in business. Life balance is so important. And so
How did you know you were unbalanced? How did you know when you had the right balance when so many things were in motion simultaneously? You were letting
mhm,
go of things, you were taking on new things, you had normal responsibilities of personal and
mhm.
walk with God. And then like I said, you're letting go of your security blanket, probably fearfully and trying to climb at the same time. When did you know you were unbalanced? When did you know you were starting to find a balance?
In a word, fatigue. And I'm not talking
Okay.
about just physical fatigue because that could tell me when I'm not getting enough rest, when I'm not getting proper nourishment, physical fatigue, but you get spiritual fatigue. You got mental fatigue. And that let me know. I'm out of balance, and I've got to get some of that balance back. And that might mean for an evening not concentrating on the business, even though all that stuff is sitting there. I face the same thing in grad school. Same thing in grad school. Anyone that's
Okay.
been through Strenuous University regimen, you know that there's always things to do. There's always a to-do list. Always. Weekends, nights, it does not matter. There's always a to-do list. You have to make a decision. Okay, that's going to have to wait because I've got to do this.
Sure.
And you can only sacrifice so much. You can only go so long without rest. You can only go so long without a spiritual retreat. You can only go so long without fellowship and a relationship with other people. And so I felt in times of extreme fatigue, I've got a right balance here. And that's my advice to anyone that is, and you're going to go through it if you're building a
Right.
business and in other things as well, but that's what my focus is on is building a business. You are going to feel being stretched in a million different directions. And the, the wrong thing to do is just to just bore down on that one thing, forgetting everything else. You can't do that because we're mind, body, and soul. And you've got to feed all of that in order to be a fully functional human being. And
Right.
I think the biggest thing for me is, and this was true throughout my business, is finding time, and sometimes it wasn't long. There were days I would be working and eventually I got an office within one of the law firms that was my client. They leased
Oh,
me a
okay.
little office space. So I got my own little office space. So I would go there and hang out during the day. And there were times, I mean, it would just be so intense. Just the pressure and answering emails, answering phone calls, dealing
Right.
with client issues, dealing now with employee issues. And nothing more I could do, and thankfully, my office was about 4 blocks from the riverfront in Nashville.
Okay.
There were times I would just say, "Okay, I gotta clear my mind." Get up, walk down to the riverfront, 15 minutes, just clear my head, whatever, and come back. That sounds simple, but just having that little reset in the middle of the day
Right. Right.
would just sorta give me a little refresh. And so
Okay.
and that was true in my spiritual walk as well. I'm sure my prayer life suffered during that time. But there
Right.
were times I had to take time out and nurture my soul as well, and, very, very important. But let me get back to, letting go, of the safe security blanket, which
Yes.
was the side gig I was doing to make money, and that was paying the bills. And I think this is a critical decision I made. There are various points throughout building the business where I made a decision that could have stalled my growth, stunted my growth, or even stopped my growth. Or if I made that other decision, it took me to the next level. And thankfully, I made the
Okay.
right decision because what I did is I resigned those positions with those companies that I was doing the programming to focus
Got it.
entirely on building this consulting business that was not generating as much revenue as the gig stuff over here, but I saw that there was more potential in that because I could hire other people and it was scalable. I could duplicate myself. I couldn't duplicate myself as a programmer over here. I could duplicate myself as a consultant and hire other
Okay.
people to build that. And so
Right.
up to that point, that was the hardest decision I had to make is say, let go of that. And I had to completely let go of that so I could focus my energy entirely on building the part of the business that was scalable. And
By letting go, you had to have a lurch then of I don't know, X dollars. Now suddenly you have X minus Y
right.
to move forward. How long before you scaled back up to X? When you're like, holy cow, did it take six months, 3 months, or
You know,
do you even remember
I
where
don't
it's where suddenly you're digging out, you created a hole that you're digging out of so
yeah.
that you can go higher.
I don't remember it. I don't remember it being a really long time because it
Mhm.
was right in that Y2K period, leading up to that, and I was
Right.
getting calls left and right to
Okay.
do things. So I really, I had to have people to put there, and I had to have the time to put there. And so that's when I knew I had faith that the calls would
Yeah.
keep coming, and thankfully they did. And so what happened after Y2K, after the crisis was over and everybody woke up January 1, 2000, and
Right.
everything still worked, and we're like, whoa, we were just taken for a ride here. But no, these law firms needed to upgrade, and now they knew my expertise, and I was a
Right.
trusted resource for them. And so that led to even more business, and those referrals led to even more referrals. I really did zero marketing the early days of my business, probably the first 7, 8 years. Zero.
Wow.
It was
That's
all
unheard
word of
of.
mouth, all referral business. Um,
Right.
Now I say zero marketing in the traditional sense. I did market, and maybe this is a topic we'll talk about next time, is how you can take maybe latent skills that you're not even aware you have and use those to um, to build your business. And so I was able to do that through doing presentations in front of bar
Sure.
associations, attorney groups, and so on. That was a way of marketing, and that's how I marketed my business in the early days.
Non-traditional marketing, as it were.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Be
Okay.
analogous to podcasting or blogging back in the
Right.
day, that sort of thing.
So how obviously Y2K is was in the headlines. Everybody's talking about it. That was a crisis, a bit of a hoax crisis, like you said. Some old
Yep.
ancient systems did not work or so on, but not enough to warrant all the headlines. Was there any character you said you mentioned before the broadcast about there were other moments of crisis that you had to recognize and try to decide if how you could take advantage of it. Are there characteristics of crisis? Are there the different up level points, and we'll talk about those in the future, but are there points where you don't get the headlines, but you
Sure.
recognize I am the crisis solver in this moments of crisis, or this is how I can present myself as the crisis solver for this business or for a bunch of businesses?
Absolutely. Yeah, many times, obviously, the nature of what I did was technology consulting. You don't hear of this so much anymore because technology has evolved. But back in the day when it was, believe it or not, in the 90s to early 2000s, technology was really kind of in its infancy
Right.
as far as using it in business. And so you would have situations where, a network would crash and every system would go down. No email, no internet, no documents. And that is a major crisis if your business depends on that. And
Definitely.
so many times it would be someone who was not a client, and small business, small. And in the early days, I didn't cater just to law firms. I'll talk more about my decision to just
Mhm.
specialize on law firms. But in the early days, I took any business I could get. And if a small business had a network crash, and through a referral, they found out about me and they called, they were in a crisis. And my ability to go in and to be a stabilizing force in that crisis meant everything. It meant everything to them, and it meant a whole lot to my business because now
Right.
I'm identified as, okay, you you performed in a crisis. You were a stabilizing figure and you righted the ship. If you can do that, I don't care, what pressure you're under. And I was under immense pressure on multiple occasions to get things done and to get things done quickly. And I felt that. But I also knew, and this is partly my nature. Like I said, by nature, I'm a problem. I like to do puzzles. That's what I do before I go to bed at night. I do crossword puzzles. I like to figure things out.
Okay.
That's who I am. And if I can go in and I can figure out your puzzle and I can solve it, and that's a
Right.
win for me, and that's a
Hmm.
win for them, and that's a win for the business. So I loved when a crisis erupted, as long as it was a
Okay.
crisis I didn't cause. Now, I
There is that.
there is that. Maybe we'll talk about that another day.
Yes. Yeah.
That was not good. That was not a good experience, but you're gonna have them.
Right.
Might as well get ready
Right.
for it. I'll tell
Right.
you later how I dealt with that. But yeah, if you can be a stabilizing figure in time of crisis, whether it's Y2K or whether it's my network is down and I can't do anything and I've got
Mhm.
clients that are waiting to hear from me, being that stabilizing figure is so important, not just in this business, but in any business. And
Right.
what I've found over the years is that times of crises were instrumental or were inflection points that took my business from level here to the next
Mhm.
level.
Okay.
I learned that the hard
And
way, going through a couple of those and then seeing where we were after the crisis was over. And I'm like, whoa, a crisis is an opportunity. Seize it. Seize it. You don't get many of those. Seize it, solve it, and then move to the next level.
and with each crisis, are you letting go of a different type of security blanket?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. In that
Okay.
Y2K, yes, because my attention was split between 2 different things,
Sure.
2 different paths, and I could not deal with this crisis over here while diverting part of my attention over here. So I had to say,
Right.
"Forget that. Let's go over here." But in some
Okay.
cases, no, it just means adjusting.
Okay. Different types of sacrifice to take advantage of the crisis.
Absolutely. But that's the
That makes
key.
sense.
Can't you said taking advantage of the crisis. And you hate to say that, but when people are in crisis, taking advantage means getting in there to help solve and to be a stabilizing force for that crisis. So I'm not saying
Right.
in the sense of taking advantage of people. I'm saying
Yeah.
seizing the opportunity within that crisis to be a problem solver and to be a stable force.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, as a general rule, crisis is something that you certainly didn't create. So solving it doesn't and fixing it with them paying you doesn't make you a bad person any more than
right.
spiritual crises where you pray or give comfort to those and suffering and in a specific need.
I would say this,
That
generally people that are under intense pressure from crisis are not pleasant people to be around. And
makes
law
sense.
lawyers will be law lawyers would be included in that number. And so, have I endured some abuse, verbal abuse during those times? Absolutely. You gotta you know what? This is a time of crisis, just let that flow over you like water over the bridge. We gotta
Right.
because you know what? If you solve the crisis, you're their best friend, and I found that to be the case.
That's true. Situation. If you solved a genuine crisis, they're
Yep.
incredibly gratitude.
It
Definitely. Those are great tips and insights. Thank you so much for sharing that today.